and non-recreational if the primary function of the body of water was stormwater management. It was deemed non-recreational. And the classification of recreational, it's pretty broad. There was not a distinction within that classification between passive viewing and active swimming, boating, fishing, recreation. So this report includes the present inventory and 2 future scenarios. Scenario 1 and Scenario 2 both correspond to the Boneyard Creek Master Plan. Scenario 1 includes segments 1 and 2 being completed, and Scenario 2 assumes that 1, 2, 4, and 5 have been completed. And the present inventory, of course, counts segment 3. In addition to the scenarios, all of them have a served/underserved area, which is a half-mile buffer around an accessible recreational body of water laid over the city of Urbana. And what built into this report, the methodology from the original report, the Boneyard Creek Master Plan informed the 2 scenarios, and Google Earth and Champaign County GIS Consortium provided a lot of the data and the examination. So the 2015 inventory, you can see that about 77% of water in Urbana can be considered recreational, as opposed to the 23% that cannot. And you will see the 23% carry on throughout the 2 scenarios. Yes.
So you said that if it's stormwater, then that's deemed non-recreational, but so did you do different segments of the boneyard in different ways depending on
the boneyard was considered
whole?
recreational for its whole length.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry to interrupt. And I might have missed this. If you covered it, I apologize. This is based on a linear, waterfront of the water?
Yes.
Okay.
It's stream edge and lakeshore, and there are stream edge and lakeshore tables in the full report, just not in this presentation. You'll see the 23% carry on through both scenarios because neither scenario notes a change in what's recreational and what's not, just what's accessible and what is not. So that 23% will stay consistent. And accessible and inaccessible, you can see a roughly 60-40 division. And both of these are considering from the total water, not this accessible and inaccessible water does not count yet whether it's recreational or not. You can see some of the map, I hope in acceptable detail. And I'll be able to provide the full report to all of you after this meeting, so you can look at it in greater detail.
I've updated it online as you sent the email.
Okay, great, thank you. So as you can see in the table in the chart, there's the same 23%, and currently we have about 47% are accessible recreational, and 29.5 are recreational but currently not accessible for the reasons I described in the methodology section. So moving on to scenario 1, this is assuming that a length of the Boneyard Creek has become accessible that was formerly not, according to the work being done that's outlined in the Boneyard Creek Master Plan. It appears to be, from the pie chart and from the table, a relatively small percentage increase, but that's because it's working with such a large total number. And the linear feet, the differences in linear feet are also in the full report. And so you can see on the served and underserved overlay that there's a significant and notable change in that, even if the percentage looks quite small.
Kathleen, I didn't look at that served, underserved on the previous map. Could you go back real quick?
Yes.
So where Can you move your mouse and point it? Where is the part that that is the scenario 1 change?
The scenario 1 change is a handful of blocks right
Okay.
around this area in central Urbana.
So then when you go to the next slide, then that becomes,
And it becomes more dramatic moving into scenario 2, where there's a greater increase in the percentage and a greater increase in the served and underserved area. So with scenario 2, assuming that all the phases in the Boneyard Creek Master Plan are completed, fully 50% of the waters in the city of Urbana will be accessible and recreational. These two maps add in the idea that a public swimming pool could qualify as accessible and recreational, which they were not counted in the obviously in the previous maps. So if those are counted as accessible recreational water, you can see the served area increase, but that also is really a definition question of whether this should only pertain to naturally occurring or stormwater survey, or whether a swimming pool would qualify in this report. And you can see that there are only the maps here because the perimeter of the two public swimming pools would make such a negligible difference in terms of linear feet that really I wanted to highlight the served area where it had the greater impact. And just to provide a little extra context to the served and underserved areas, there are population maps where you can see these are by census blocks, and the color coded so that the lighter to darker squares have fewer or more people in them. So you can, yes.
sorry, just for the bubble that counts as a served area, what was that radius? Was it a
Half mile
Half
buffer,
mile.
yes. So you can see where much of northern Urbana is outside of this area, but with the exception of these two developments here, most of it has relatively few people in it, whereas the central Urbana, technically underserved portion, has both more and less populated census blocks within it. Yes.
So I'm sorry because I did not review the actual plan or the Boneyard Creek plan. Just the definition of that half mile, is that something that we selected as a community, or is that something that
No, that
came
was
from
something that
some national-
RPC and I added to the report to give a sort of an easy walking radius frame of reference.
Okay.
Completely certain about my geography, but the Salt Fork continues northeast off the map and outside the city boundaries, but possibly in a way that abuts the parcel kind of hanging down in that direction near Airport Road and things like that.
Okay.
Is the Salt Fork not publicly accessible in that area, so it wouldn't count towards public accessible water in this inventory?
The Salt Fork did not appear because it was outside of city limits.
Okay,
It
so
was
it's just not city water.
evaluated.
Yeah, fair enough.
Are there other?
I had one
Comments or
other.
questions?
So again, spotty knowledge, but I think there's a bike trail master planning document that may contemplate additional access, but perhaps it duplicates water that's already deemed accessible, and so it doesn't change the
Mhm.
analysis. Are you aware of those documents, and did that play
Uh,
into this?
I am aware of those documents that did not play into this report. One future sort of addition to this report, if there is interest to it, could be an evaluation of trail and sidewalk and bike path access to these accessible recreational waters.
I have a question. Again, speaking from having not read these reports in any way, is there a goal or a metric for Urbana about increasing this? So, like, do we aim to increase the accessibility or?
So there was two actions in our water plan. One was to conduct this analysis, to at least the first half of this analysis, to evaluate where we stand in terms of public access to recreational waters. The second goal was to evaluate what a public access goal might be. So if we and so that's kind of the second half of the analysis that Kathleen's done, which is, looking at, well, if we were to build out these sections of the boneyard, what are the implications? If we decide that public swimming pools count as publicly accessible recreational waters, what are the implications? And then is there something more we should be thinking about beyond that? So I think a question or a couple questions before the commission are, how do we want to consider public swimming pools? And second, are the next 4 phases of the boneyard as ambitious as we can reasonably be in terms of public access to recreational waters? And then lastly, is there some additional aspiration that we have? And I think this could be kind of a statement of general principle. It doesn't have to be a formal resolution to the mayor or anything like that. And, it could be a discussion that we would have with engineering staff and so forth. But I think those are kind of the questions before us.
Other comments or questions?
So I'm wondering that. So we had scenarios of future Boneyard Creek development. Are there other opportunities for making accessibility where there's not currently? Are those waters available?
Those were the two. The boneyard was the main focus of this report, but maybe this area up in the north could be an opportunity because that is currently inaccessible recreational, and this region up here could be an additional opportunity. Also, these 2 lakes on the are in a park site that is not yet open to the public, but will eventually be so. So with those 2 lakes becoming publicly accessible, that will probably also show a significant jump.
Something to keep in mind is that I think this is good. While much of our water bodies are not accessible, with a half-mile buffer, pretty much everything that's around them already. And what we're left with is the northern areas where there's no population, so lower priority. I mean, those are industrial areas, substantially industrial anyway. The central area of the city, primarily residential, and there's no naturally occurring water bodies there, so we're unlikely to dig a lake. So the question is, what do you do about that? Maybe you do nothing, or maybe things like public swimming pools or splash pads in a park count. If you go, can you go back a couple slides? Yeah. There's a park near Philo Road. If there was a water feature there, like a park-appropriate water feature, like a splash pad, and if that counted, and then you put a half-mile buffer around that, including the half-mile buffer that is around the pool there in this rendering, well, now you've really got a substantial part of the city.
So I have a question about how you scored the I guess it's labeled here, the Perkins Road Park site, because you're right, that there hasn't been public access there for 5 years or more. Right now, at least in our baseline, was that scored as accessible or inaccessible?
That was scored as recreational inaccessible.
Is inaccessible, okay.
And those are the two where, if they become accessible, that'll be a substantial increase.
Mm-hmm. But neither of those were modeled in scenario 1 or 2.
Right.
Okay.
So so with this, one thing that this map does well, and that I think that we were trying to accomplish in the plan was, quantifying just, how much accessibility is there in linear feet, and so those are, those are nice metrics. Some things that are a little more difficult are the quality of the access, and so, with the Boneyard improvement projects, those are great examples of quality improvement. And so, I asked the question before, like, are there opportunities? And so maybe in this context of quality improvement opportunities, are there others besides the Boneyard that are kind of latent? They're out there and they're just not on the docket yet, or are there other quality improvement plans that maybe that I'm not thinking about?
I'm not really aware of any quality improvement plans that are on deck right now, but there are a few areas that could potentially have quality improvements, I'm sure, throughout the city.
So I would say a couple. Again, that Perkins Road site, what's been happening in that since public access was formally closed is a series of grants to restore that habitat. And there's been wetland restoration and removal of contaminated sediments and replanting prairie. And so that's a parcel that's not quite, but approaching Meadowbrook Park in size, with a big water feature, with lots of water features. And again, a little spotty on this, but I think the Park District also, at least last budget cycle, planned on some salt fork improvement projects within Crystal Lake Park that we're going to, the portion that's flowing through Crystal Lake Park is currently kind of behind trees and a little bit out of sight, out of mind. The impoundment there is a little more obvious, but there's a flowing portion of the salt fork that I've seen draft plans of a substantial improvement project that would open that up into things like, playing in the creek and having access. Yeah, I think the enhancement of the quality of access is what we had in mind when we crafted this criteria. And to speak to the swimming pool and the splash pad, and I certainly am not against those things at all, but I do think what we thought about when we were talking about, and you have to remind me, Scott, did we have a habitat criteria too, or was it mostly recreation?
I think the discussion was along the lines of focusing on the recreational and ecological value of surface waters.
Right.
Crystal Lake is dug several times by different people, so it's calling it natural is a perspective, but I think everyone that they include that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But maybe a public pool with chlorine and a splash pad are too different.
And I suppose just turning on the fountain in Carl Park isn't going to really
Right.
boost our numbers.
Well, and those kinds of amenities, they stand on their own value. Like that, I don't think they necessarily have to be compatible with this to demonstrate their value.
And there's a big difference whether you look at access in terms of a half-mile buffer, or whether you look at every linear foot. Clearly there's a lot of linear feet of the Boneyard, which is not very accessible and not very high quality. So depending on how you look at it, we either have a lot of work or very little work. But if you also consider the substantial plans already made for Boneyard improvements, it's difficult to know how many years in the future, maybe decades in the future, it would take to work through all of that. So, what do you do? Set a 30-year plan or a 50-year goal? I don't know.
You know, I mean, that's what we do in the climate action plan. You know, we're planning for, 50 years out, maybe 5 or so years at a time. So anyway, it's, with budget and everything, it's difficult to, but I don't know if it's totally unreasonable for, I mean, those are big infrastructure projects. I mean, everybody knows that. So maybe if there's plans in place, I mean, I don't know who wants to wait decades, but wouldn't be a terrible idea to have some kind of plans in place, or some ideas at least.
Mhm.
All right. Further comments, questions, discussion? Okay. Well, thanks for coming to present, and also thanks for all your work on getting this inventory pulled together. It's really helpful for us.
Thank you. I'll
Thanks.
make sure the report is available.
Great. And I think we can circle back to Scott for an update on our sustainable water management plan.
Okay, so we've been plugging away at all of our activities in the Sustainable Water Management Plan for a couple of years. And so I thought I'd take a moment in this meeting to kind of update everyone on where we stand. Just a reminder, we started out with 5 aspects of water sustainability: potable water supply and demand, potable water quality, surface water and stormwater, flood management, and recreational waters, which we've been talking about today. The time frame was essentially 2013 to 2020. The plan was formally approved by council on July 15th, 2013. But actually, some of the elements of the plan we just started working on in the beginning of 2013. So it's still kind of a 7-year thing. This is the status of where we're at presently. We're not halfway through the time frame. We're 63% complete, 34% is in progress, and 3% is in the queue. What I want to do next is just go through line by line, but quickly, of where we're at on all the items. So, aspect 1, potable water supply and demand. First goal was to continue a decreasing trend of per capita potable water use. The first action was to track potable water use for community and for city of Urbana facilities. These are all color-coded, by the way. Orange means in progress, green means done, black means in the queue, and red means it's an additional note. So the first bullet point under track potable water use is work with water company to ensure annual water consumption reporting, showing monthly. We haven't focused on monthly. We are getting good data from Illinois American. However, we do not have 2013 data yet. We do have 2014, but for whatever reason, we just haven't gotten 2013 yet. We continue to seek that. We do have data going back to, I can't remember the date, somewhere in the early or mid 2000s. We'll see it a little bit later. So we have good data. The second bullet point is seek similar cities to share and compare data with. This is something I'm very interested in. We have a collaborating organization called Prairie State Sustainability Network. It's a partnership of sustainability managers at cities throughout the state. And I've first broached sharing and comparing data a couple of years ago with our greenhouse gas emissions data, and it hasn't gone very far. So bringing up an additional data sets probably wouldn't have worked. The organization is currently working to join the U.S. Sustainability Directors Network, United States Sustainability Directors Network, I think is the name, as an affiliate. That's going to open up a lot of new website applications through USDN. So essentially, I'm kind of in a waiting mode to see what's going to shake out there, and we may have another opportunity. Second action is demonstrate, promote, or incentivize practices to reduce potable water use for commercial, residential, or irrigation purposes. The first bullet point, promote water-saving shower heads, faucet, aerators, toilets, pre-rinse spray valves, and so on. I've got that marked as complete. We've been doing the rain barrel sale every year, and we also partnered with the Muhammad Aquifer Consortium to run a Fix a Leak Week promotion, which is a national event every year. Second bullet point is organize a rain barrel truck sale to encourage stormwater reuse. I've got the dates there in the notes that we've been working on that project. Third bullet point, promote appropriate lawn irrigation practices. And I've got that marked as complete. We've got the stormwater utilities in effect. We're promoting it, especially through the rain barrel sale. And then we've also got some information on our website about irrigation practices and lawn practices. The webpage is called Better Lawns and Gutters. It's on the city's website. Staying with the same aspect, same goal, Action 3, consider adoption of the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission's forthcoming Model Water Use Restriction Ordinance. This commission did evaluate that and decided that it did not fit our needs, and so we chose not to recommend it. So that's complete. Action 4, assess feasibility of a rain sensor and/or soil moisture sensor ordinance for new landscape irrigation systems. There is currently a discussion of amending the state plumbing code to that effect. So we're in a waiting mode to see if that's going to get taken care of for us. If the state chooses not to update the plumbing code in that manner, there is quite a substantial process. There's a couple different steps to change the local plumbing code, or to change the local plumbing code, which normally is essentially adopted from the state plumbing code. So it's not as simple as just passing an ordinance, but we'll wait and see what the state does. Action 5, assess feasibility of a topsoil retention ordinance. Draft language to that effect has been in a subdivision ordinance update. It just hasn't been able to move forward yet with community development. They've had turnover in the relevant staff positions. Action 6, collaborate with Muhammad Aquifer stakeholders in coordinated messaging and policies. First bullet point is consider common messaging, encouraging water conservation and proper disposal of hazardous waste, household hazardous waste. This kind of repeats itself in another, in a different aspect of the plan, in the water quality aspect. And so since there's two things there, I've marked one as complete and the other in progress. What I'm considering complete is, again, this Fix a Leak Week communications. What I'm marking as in progress, and you'll see in a couple slides, is the household hazardous wastes aspect. There's still some work to do there, I think. Same aspect, Goal 2, reduce potable water use in city-owned buildings by 24%. First of all, we've blown past the 24%, but moving on to the Action 1, retrofit water-saving faucet aerators. We've changed all the faucet aerators in the city to low flow. Action 2, also marked complete, upgrade computer server room cooling system. That has happened. It's no longer a water cooling system.
A little slow on the uptake here. Can I stop you?
Sure.
The collaborate with Muhammad Aquifer stakeholders, if you mark that as complete, that's complete through 2020. So I think that there could be changing conditions, and that's more of an ongoing task. So
Sure.
I might recommend leaving it in progress.
I can do that.
Just in case there's change conditions. Fix a Leak Week was really good, but it's probably not seven years worth of
Sure.
collaboration.
Maybe there's a group item called ongoing, as opposed to, I see a difference personally between in progress, where we're trying to accomplish it, and ongoing, where we're maintaining what we did. Something like that.
That's fair.
There's a number of items that are like that, where
Yeah.
you
Okay.
you could say, you should be doing something about that every year, kind of thing. So, point taken. Again, same aspect, Goal 2, Action 3, reduce water use for landscape irrigation. We've installed 2 irrigation controls a simple rain sensor and also an evapotranspiration sensor through a grant with ISTC. That's complete, and you'll see the numbers of the water consumption reductions in a little bit. Second bullet point there, consider resilient landscapes that minimize use of labor, water, and energy through plant selection and limited or no irrigation for all landscape plans for city-owned properties. We're not adding a lot of properties, so there's not a lot of, we're not adding many properties, so there's not a lot of new to be done at this point. But we have done a lot of activities that are in this vein. I mentioned the irrigation control systems. We've also installed 22 moisture retaining planter baskets, so they should demand less water. They should be holding a little more moisture. 46% of trees selected for 2015 are native to eastern North America, so they should be adapted to our water regime. 2014 irrigation consumption was down 20% from 2012, and overall city facilities water consumption is down 48%, pretty substantial. This general principle of resilient landscapes is an ongoing and developing principle that we talk with the Arbor Division about. Same aspect, goal 2. Oh, that's a repeat. Oh, no, it's not. Sorry. Action 4. Retrofit water-saving toilets where appropriate. Haven't started any of those. We aimed at 9 for this plan. That's just a money and time thing. I think the way this will go is if there's that much money or some portion of that much money left at the end of the budget cycle, we may be able to get these in at the end of a budget cycle. Action 5, I've got marked as complete. Assess opportunities for reuse of water treated by the Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District. We've spoken to the Sanitary District and we've worked that out. They've told us where we can tap treated wastewater for irrigation purposes. It just hasn't happened at the city. There is some barriers in terms of perceived risk for using that water for staff health, and so that hasn't happened yet. It's marked complete because the action says assess the opportunities. Action 6, in progress, establish a policy of choosing EPA WaterSense labeled products for city procurement. A green procurement policy has been completed by staff and in collaboration with other folks in the city, and is just being considered by executive branch. Moving on, aspect 2, potable water quality. Goal 1, protect potable water quality in the Mahomet Aquifer. Action 1, marked complete, continue to pursue sole source aquifer status. We have received that status, so that's excellent and that's complete. Action 2, continue to pursue appropriate legal action to protect the Mahomet Aquifer. That's marked in progress. Now, I've sent you information that the Clinton landfill has chosen to cease pursuing a PCB landfill, but they have not, nothing's changed legally. They've just stopped trying to permit it. So it's my understanding that the cities who are collaborating on legal action regarding the Mahomet are going to continue their legal activities to increase protections, regardless, because at this point, that landfill or another site could pursue the same type of activity. It hasn't been prohibited in any way. Action 3, collaborate with Mahomet Aquifer stakeholders in coordinated messaging and policies. First bullet point, when I was referencing before, consider common messaging, marked as in progress. Second bullet point, consider policies or ordinances to protect the Mahomet Aquifer recharge areas in need of protection. There is actually Kathleen is leading, as staff is leading a group who is looking at additional Mahomet Aquifer activities, protections, opportunities. Recharge areas may become part of that scope. It's not certain yet at this point. There may be some more science that needs to be done. I know there's a general sense of where some recharge areas are, but we don't know everything about the aquifer yet. Goal 2, investigate activities to protect potable water quality. Action 1, assess legal funding and staffing needs for brownfield cleanup. We conducted kind of a scoping analysis of what it takes to go through a brownfields cleanup process, shared that with staff at the city, and also shared that with SAC a couple of years ago. Action 2, assess feasibility of a household hazardous waste collection events. That's marked in progress. The Regional Planning Commission has published a draft Phase 3 study on hazardous waste collection, focusing on a permanent site that would be part-time open. And the draft is on their website. You can read it, but it's not final. It's part of a grant, so they need to submit it to their grant funders. And so I'm going to leave that as in progress until the final is done. When it is finalized, I'm going to ask Susan Monty to come and talk to the SAC about that. Next bullet, assess proposed state legislation to establish architectural paint product stewardship. We did evaluate that and have supported actively. Courtney Rushforth, recycling coordinator, is actively supporting through the Illinois Product Stewardship Council is actively supporting product stewardship for paint. Aspect 3, surface water and stormwater quality. Goal 1, protect surface water and stormwater quality. Action 1, marked as complete, continue to implement stormwater utility credit and incentive program. Again, you're kind of always doing that forever and ever. We'll be doing that program. So a primary driver of uptake of that program is actually the rain barrel sale. So we're continuing to do that as long as we can have an interested vendor. Action 2, marked as in progress, demonstrate and promote environmentally friendly landscaping techniques. First bullet point, promote judicious application of fertilizers and pesticides, as well as on-site stormwater management, including tree planting, bioswales, rain gardens. I mentioned we have this Better Homes and Gutters page on our website. We have a little bit of content on UPTV. I think there's more to do there. There's a lot of collaboration possible for extension service. I've talked to folks over there about doing something with UPTV. We just haven't put it together yet. Second bullet point I've got marked as in progress. Create better lawns and gutters information and tour. The information is on the website. I haven't done the tour yet. Again, I think that's a good opportunity for bringing in collaborators who are focusing on that more than the city is. Goal 2, investigate activities to protect surface water and stormwater. Action 1, assess best practices for inspections, maintenance, and regulation of private and municipal stormwater storage and or stormwater treatment facilities. That's retention pond inspections. We're transitioning an engineer from the Boneyard project onto this and other engineering activities. And so the infrastructure of how we will be monitoring and regulating stormwater pond maintenance is being developed presently. Action 2, marked as complete, assess feasibility of maintaining a pharmaceutical waste collection drop box at the police station. That's complete. It's right outside the window. Action 3 is marked as complete. Report EPA TMDL testing to the SAC. That data is published every 2 years, and so I'm essentially taking a 100-page report that is looking at statewide data and turning it into a 3-page report that just looks at Urbana's waters. Aspect 4, flood management. Goal 1, ensure that the focus group called to address climate change adaptation. In Goal 4 of the Urbana Climate Action Plan addresses management and mitigation of potential flood impacts. And we did take those into consideration when we passed Phase 2 of the Climate Action Plan. And last aspect, recreational waters. Goal 1, support access to and use of recreational waters. Action 1, assess current amount of public access to recreational waters. That's complete. Action 2, assess a long-term public access goal for recreational waters in Urbana. That's in progress tonight and maybe another night. Action 3, marked as complete, promote an appreciation for the ecological, aesthetic, and economic values of recreational waters as green infrastructure. another one that could be done every year, every day. It's ongoing. But what I've made a note of is the citizen science activity we did last year. That group is changing how they want to run that event. They're really focusing on smaller number of locations with a series of samples throughout the summer. So it remains to be seen whether the folks that came out last year are going to be up for that type of commitment. I think it's still a really nice way to get a data set and get people involved. So I want to pursue it nonetheless. And then Boneyard Creek events I've also made note of is part of highlighting Urbana's waterfront. Any questions at this point? I mentioned a couple of things that are pending and may be resolved in the affirmative in the next few months. So, for instance, the irrigation controls ordinance might become part of the state plumbing code. Green procurement may take care of one of our actions. And just to kind of see what our status would look like if those came, those 3 or 4 items came to pass, this is where we would be. Say by the end of the year, if those pending items came to pass, would be 3/4 of the way complete. I've got some visual highlights from the plan, starting in the top left, working clockwise. That is a photo of our pharmaceutical waste collection that's maintained by the police. It's in partnership with Champaign and Campus Police. They take turns who delivers everyone's collected pharmaceuticals to the waste incineration facility in Indianapolis. Moving to the right, that's the in-progress boneyard with the atrazine sample equipment. To the right again is the evapotranspiration equipment on Philo Road to control irrigation. Down below that is a shot of the completed boneyard, very much in the spirit of Goal 5 or Aspect 5. And then to the left is this year's rain barrel and compost bin sale. I've also got some data highlights. This is all community water consumption within the city of Urbana by sector. You'll notice there's an asterisk for 2013. Again, I don't have data for 2013 from the water company, so I just took 2012 and 2014 and averaged them, divided by 2, just to keep it continuous. You can see that things are moving in the right direction. Conservation continues to increase. This is the same data set, but by capita. The blue line is all the sectors together divided by population. The red line is just residential water consumption divided by population. You're never really sure how it's being reported when you read a news article of other cities. I'm never certain whether they mean all of the city's water divided by population or just household water use divided by population. Sometimes it's explicit, sometimes it's not, so I thought I'd be explicit. I do know that being below 40 is quite low per capita per day. This is city facilities water consumption. You can see a precipitous drop in irrigation water consumed. I'd like to claim all that for our irrigation controllers, but it's a lot of things. Repairs, turning off systems where they weren't really needed anymore. And we also have a reduction in building water consumption. This is a visualization of our surface water quality. So we have 4 surface waters that get reported on by the EPA, and each one of those surface waters has a number of designated uses. So I just threw all of those together as one number, and then map the change in the status of their designated uses. So there's not much change, but you can see that most of the designated uses are not even assessed. That's not particular to Urbana. They just don't have the staffing and funding to be able to assess every water in the state for every designated use. They each have. Right. Right. This is a chart of the status of all of the designated uses for all 4 water bodies. And that's it. I'll take any questions you have.
Is the public sector, is that like city buildings or city usage?
Yeah, that's actually all public sector. So I suspect there's a lot of university buildings in there, maybe.
Oh.
It's questionable whether, so in our climate, in our greenhouse gas reporting, we don't have public sector as a sector. We have commercial, residential, industrial. So I may change this in the future to just roll in what's public sector here into commercial, just so that they're both
Water.
parallel. Yes. Yes. Yeah, these are the sectors that Illinois American gives in their reports, so that's how I've started to report it. But I may want to make, the divisions, the sectors parallel to the greenhouse gas reporting.
I wonder if there's a basis or some kind of benchmark so that we as a community of our size and composition have some way. I mean, so the trend is great, and so do we have a goal that's just, well, let's just keep decreasing, or is there any kind of guidance or something to aim for and say, we really want to get to, I don't know what.
I'm very interested in that, and that's why I want to cultivate this data sharing and comparing.
Mm-hmm. With the other communities.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've tried to just do a Google search, and it's really difficult to find anything. And when you find something, you're really not sure if you're really comparing apples to apples. But I think that's really important because, for instance, 40 gallons per day. What I see, you see these sort of offhand, in the U.S., the average is, that's a big country. That's doesn't mean much. I know we're lower than the U.S. average, but lower compared to California or lower compared to upstate New York could make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing is, so obviously in Urbana we want to do what we can, but then we're also in the context of the Mahomet Aquifer. And so we're with a whole bunch of other communities that are all sharing the same resource, and we all have a stake in making sure that it's there. And so, I'm wondering if there are other communities that are, I don't know if we need to benchmark ourselves against each other, or if it's, if there's just some way of, sharing among those communities, or if there's, I don't know, little competitive games, or whether it's just, even just forgetting about the competition, and just expanding the boundary of interest beyond Urbana to, let's, as a watershed. Well, maybe that's not a watershed. What do we call that? Well, anyways, an aquifer shed. I'm using the wrong technical terms, but.
Yeah, I think it's really important. We're engaged in a couple of efforts. One I mentioned with the Prairie State Sustainability Network. The group that Kathleen is leading, hopefully that'll be an opportunity to get other communities interested in collecting the same type of metrics that we're collecting, and just putting them somewhere public every year. It doesn't have to be too complicated because people can always take the raw data and make an interesting rendering out of it. and kind of tell the story of the data. But we need to do that. I've set up such a platform. I don't know if it's really public. It's probably public, but not findable for greenhouse gases through the Prairie State Sustainability Network. And there was 2 cities that uploaded their own greenhouse gas data. Urbana was one of them, and Evanston's the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have 2 data points, but couldn't get anyone else to do
You've
it.
talked about engagement with the Muhammad Aquifer Consortium in the past. Is that I don't know, is that still going? Are you city still participating in that? Any updates on that?
So what the plan calls for is partnering with Muhammad Aquifer stakeholders, and certainly the Muhammad Aquifer Consortium is one, and that's who we partnered with for the Fix the Leak Week, and I think that's a really good opportunity. EPA supports it with some decent infrastructure in terms of communications. Lots of communities do it, and it's a good opportunity to draw attention. I think we can do more with that in the future.
All right, thanks.
Can I just, real quick, just the total university consumption is about 1 million kilogallons a year. But our address is the Henry Administration Building, which is in the city of Urbana, so it could be that all of that's being counted.
Scott, I'd just like to get your thoughts on the irrigation, the sensor experiment.
Yeah.
And just your thoughts on, was there a combination of sensors in there that seemed to kind of jump out as providing some good results, or did nothing like that kind of...
We're really in the height of, it's not been that hot actually. We're coming into the height of irrigation season. So in terms of good data to compare, we're just getting into it.
Okay.
So for instance, in spring, we don't, the irrigation just never gets turned on, so there's nothing to compare. But what we set up was one test on Philo, 2 sides of the road. They're essentially the same. So one side was the control, didn't change anything. It's just on a timer. The other side is the test. That's got the timer plus the evapotranspiration sensor. So those would be compared for the same time period against each other. We have another test at the landscape around the viaduct on Vine in front of Publix.
Mhm.
Not Publix. I'm still in Florida. Schnucks. I still call it Publix. In front of Schnucks.
It's only been
And so
10 years. No.
it's a grocery store. So what was there before was just a timer, and and there's only one, so we changed that to a rain sensor. And so that's a test of before and after, not the same time period, but before and after.
Okay.
So we'll have data at the end of the summer, and hopefully there'll be some distinction. We're going to continue collecting that granular data, every account
Mhm.
we collect in database, and we're going to keep the irrigation controls. So we may see, over a couple years, there may be, a trend may become more apparent.
Thanks.
The picture that you showed had some kind of electronic transmitter or receiver or something like that.
Yeah.
What is that?
I'm trying to remember what kind of ET controller this is. It may be talking to a weather station to
Okay.
get direction.
Okay.
There's a couple different kinds. Some of them just take weather data right where they are and feed it into the computer. Some of them talk to a weather station and get weather data. You can also get ones that transmit your data Wi-Fi to a computer, but we don't have that.
So as far as I understand, while one aspect of Urbana's water use footprint is the disposition of our water after we use it and the changes that the sanitary district is in their discharge, which historically went into the Salt Fork and enhanced that flow, essentially making it a drought-proof tributary of the Vermilion River and creating aquatic refuge and uncommonly high biodiversity in the Salt Fork as a result. And so I believe this is right. The Cronus plant's being built. The water, substantial share of that water is going to be reallocated into supporting regional economic development, and that ratepayers in the district will benefit from sale of that water. But in terms of our sustainability plan and just taking account of our ecological footprint, that's a substantial change of how Urbana residents' involvement with water is changing. So I'm not aware, other than possibly some voluntary measures and some monitoring that might be underway by the sanitary district and by some public agencies, if there's any other work in place. I mean, I'm really impressed at all the things that are going on, and I don't know to what extent we'd be interested in trying to encourage involvement or activity or to try to monitor that situation and contribute to at least understanding the impacts of what changed. But I've always been convinced that the public has an interest in that change of the disposition of our water. We pay to pump it out of the ground. We benefit from using it. We pay to clean it up. Again, we're getting some monetary benefit from selling it, which is great. But it had benefits in its prior disposition as well that a lot of people care about, and a lot of money is invested in supporting those species and managing those habitats as well, and they're going to be impacted. So just wanted to flag it, put it on the record.
Well, the SAC, when those discussions were happening, public meetings were happening, the SAC sent the sanitary district a letter, I believe, asking, trying to remember, I think it was asking for studies or minimum flow or something to that effect, or both. I know that minimum flow guarantees are in the deal, and it's not finalized yet, although there seems to be a lot of work moving in that direction. But minimum flows were in the deal, and I know there was discussion of using some of those, some of the revenue to leverage additional grants to do monitoring. I don't know what the, if that's a commitment or if that was a discussion, but I think it's worthy work.
On that point, the executive director, Rick Manor, was, he was nice enough to come out here and spend time with us and present on it, and we heard from Prairie Rivers Network at that time too. And I think the request that we put forward essentially adopted what the Prairie Rivers Network was asking for. But I wonder if at some point after things get finalized, Cronus is in progress, the water is moving that direction, if maybe there's an update presentation. Could be something.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of work done if that deal goes through in terms of, the sanitary district upgrades. And then also, like I said, I think there was at least discussion, if not commitment, to put money aside for monitoring and habitat restoration and so forth. So I think that'd be great to have Rick back.
I actually want to pose a question. So as you go through this update, and it's a really impressive presentation. I think you're doing an amazing job, just by the way. You do every month, but it's great when you go through kind of line by line and demonstrate all the progress. It's really inspiring. But I'm wondering, just at the table and yourself, when you go through it and kind of take that census, anything on the horizon that we are missing that's not in this plan that we should at least think about for the next plan? Is anyone aware of emerging issues related to the aquifer, related to other practices in other communities that we don't have? Just ask the question. And it's fine if right now we don't. It's with all the details floating around, it can be hard to figure out what's not in the picture. But
I can add an issue that is kind of on the horizon, I think. I went to a presentation in the Chicago area a couple weeks ago, and there are estimates out there as far as the cost of water, not a supply and demand thing, but infrastructure costs on the horizon because of the aging infrastructure in most cities, really around the country. But at the conference, they estimated the price of water in the Chicago area quadrupling in the next 4 years, which really kind of shows, yes, it's incredibly valuable what you've done already, but when those numbers change, I think we'll be able to look back and realize just how important this was.
Is that municipal water, supplied water?
Both the wastewater costs and replacing the majority of the water mains in the city. Some of the water mains, I'm told, are still made of wood. So good luck with that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think they were starting to meter. They used to meter like a subdivision at one spot, and now they're metering every house. So I think that was where that was going.
Oh, that's right. They would meter an entire apartment building with 1 meter, and then, I can serve as an individual.
Is anybody aware of any regulatory, ratcheting that might be coming in the future? Phosphorus and nitrogen are always out there, and at some point that gets. Essentially, you need a different plant, and so I don't know what's out there, but that kind of that kind of thing is always there, and that has implications for stormwater management and for the sanitary district as well.
I've heard discussions that more specific nutrient criteria for stormwater may come to Illinois at some point. It doesn't seem to be imminent. I think we're well positioned to deal with any extra stormwater rules because we have the stormwater utility. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. A lot of it is going to be dedicated towards maintaining existing infrastructure, but I think obviously we've set aside monies for incentives and credits. And if those aren't all used, that's funds that could be directed towards other green infrastructure projects, other nutrient abatement projects, if those become necessary. But that may come.
One other just thing to put out there is, what's the name of that community southeast of here? There was a big spill, we've had occasions of diesel spills, and you can find the rainbow-colored slicks on the boneyard, and so I wonder if those kinds of accidental discharges, if I don't know what kind of preparedness there is for that, or protective, some kind of protective measures, or if it's just. If a spill happens, it's gonna flow down, with gravity. So I guess just that's out there. It's happened to us. And is there anything other than, it just flows downhill and hopefully gets cleaned up or mitigated?
I think there's a annual spill practice run that the university does, and I believe the communities are highly involved in that too. They do a all-out, 1 to 3 day event of this major thing happen, and they do different scenarios at different locations that is actually going through the motions of what you would need to do, not just thinking about it, but walking the steps on an annual basis for. But that's about reaction, not prevention. So what to do in the case of a spill. of various kinds.
And who's involved in that?
Well, the person who I know who's involved in it at the university is Keith Erickson, with Utilities and Energy Services.
Mhm.
But there's a whole collection of people.
Okay.
I believe that both the communities are involved, the emergency services
Okay.
personnel. I don't know much more than that, though.
Okay.
Oh, what about increases in rainfall just through, all the climate change says that we're going to get all this additional rainfall. I don't know if there's something that we ought to do because of that in this.
I think we've done probably what we can do, which is we requested that the state meteorologist, is that the title?
State climatologist?
State climatologist reevaluate Bulletin 70, which dictates stormwater retention standards for developments in light of changes in expectation of rainfall.
No, we did have during the development of the plan presentations from a couple of agencies where, basically asking what were their plans for that. And, essentially it was, meet that need as it arises and, that they had the ability to scale up for it.
I guess one of the new programs for the Muhammad Aquifer is the reporting of irrigation, use and that hasn't been done before. So the Water Survey now will get information from the users on how much they're using per year.
Is that mandatory reporting now?
That's a mandatory
Oh.
reporting. Yeah.
That's a great data set.
Is there a publication is that just in progress, or is there something that's been put out?
They have to report it at the end of the growing season, so we haven't got to that point yet. So this fall they'll have the first reporting period. That
Is that everybody with a well, or is there a size threshold?
I don't remember the volume that's coming out as regards to irrigation, but there's some
Okay.
minimum for that. So.
Steve, a couple responses to your question. One item that's already in the plan is doing something with recharge protection, and that's a big issue, and I'm not sure how staff or the city can even address that. For one, there's not really any recharge in the city of Urbana limits, so we would be an interested party but not a controlling party. And another challenge is the uncertainty or the limited data that we have in modeling of the aquifer. But I think it's really important. We look at the water quantity, in terms of what's in the aquifer and how much we're taking it out, and you have something like 100-year timeline till you get down or draw down to the top of the aquifer, which is kind of, you don't really want to go beyond that. In a 100-year time frame, I would speculate that we're more likely to have a quality issue than a quantity issue. So that protecting the aquifer worries me, but I'm not sure what to do from our position. Another item, there's been suggestion from community members that we advocate for a different rate structure that would promote conservation. And talking with folks in the industry, it seems that the most opportune time to have that discussion is when a utility company goes to the state regulator for an increase in their rate, which they do every so many years. That's a good opportunity to have that discussion. So that's kind of in the back of my mind. I also mentioned better data. We have really good data on our own consumption, but we don't really have it in context. And then something Andy and I have talked about, which is, is there a potential contamination issue with old wells? I don't know if there is or not, and I don't exactly know what kind of data we have. It's something I'd like to explore more, and it's on my it's on my task list. I just haven't gotten back with Andy.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know if there are any abandoned wells on city property
Yeah, or other properties.
or public property, but private property, but because that's a serious issue, is contamination through abandoned wells. And
It'd likely be, if they're that old that they're improperly abandoned, they're probably drilled into the shallow aquifer, and we have a confined Muhammad aquifer, except not always confined. It does seem to be some interactions with surface waters and in the shallow aquifer. So
I could see a recharge zonation or something for the shallow aquifer, since there are people using that. But
Right.
that would be further study for that.
that's came to mind.
Other comments, discussion, questions? All right, thank you much, Scott. This is great. And I think we've chatted a little bit about having something similar with the Climate Action Plan.
Yeah, I want to do the same
well.
next month with the
Great.
Climate Action Plan.
Great. Now, this is, I think, a really good and valuable exercise. So, thank you. Okay, that takes care of our continuing business, and there's no new business. Do we have any announcements this evening?
So I have formed a climate team that is meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock on the patio of the Iron Post. And if any of you would like to join, please tell us. But we are going to do it this month, so you have to be there tomorrow if you want to.
Great. So it's just a general, like, what's the mission of the team? Or is it, or should I ask, given the venue where where the meeting's being held?
Well, I don't know yet. Scott has to explain it to us tomorrow.
Okay.
You're
You
welcome
all
to
saw
right now.
Pester Power.
Okay, great. Great.
Morgan's creating a climate action team.
Excellent. This is both on the CCNet site and also on ISU's site. There is a renewable energy conference at the Center for Renewable Energy on July 16th. Close by, relatively inexpensive registration, so if that's of interest, there's easily accessed information on how to register. I don't know if there's other announcements tonight. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, your last motion. Is there a second? It's okay.
I second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, we are adjourned.